In the spring of 2022, the world of crypto was booming. Bitcoin was holding strong. Venture capital was pouring billions into the space. And in the middle of this digital gold rush stood a coin unlike any other, Luna, a project that promised not just wealth but stability. A system so elegant, so mathematically sound, that it was supposed to redefine money itself. And for a brief moment, it did. A stablecoin that always stayed at $1, a companion token that climbed into the stratosphere, and a community that believed they were part of something unstoppable, but they weren't. Because while investors were celebrating, a hidden flaw deep inside Luna's code had already started ticking. It wasn't obvious. There were no headlines, no alarms, just a quiet series of transactions, calculated, deliberate. And then, over the course of just 72 hours, $45 billion vanished. The stablecoin collapsed. Luna was obliterated. Investors were ruined. Regulators were blindsided. And the shockwave that followed almost took the entire crypto market with it. And the man behind it all became a fugitive. Some called it an accident. Others called it an attack. But to those who lost everything, it didn't feel like a failure. It felt like betrayal. This is not just the story of a cryptocurrency collapse. This is the story of belief pushed past reason, of arrogance disguised as genius, of how one of the most promising ideas in finance became one of the fastest wealth destructions in history. And it begins not with Luna's fall, but with the man who built it. This is the story of Luna. His real name was Kwon Do-hyung, but online, he was simply known as Do Kwon. And in the world of crypto, he was something of a rising star, sharp, articulate, fearless. A Stanford graduate with a background in software engineering, he had the resume of someone destined for tech greatness. Before striking out on his own, he had even worked as a software engineer at both Microsoft and Apple, two of the most prestigious names in tech. More than just credentials, he carried himself with the confidence of someone convinced he was building the future. In 2018, he co-founded Terraform Labs in Seoul, South Korea, alongside entrepreneur Daniel Shin. What they set out to build wasn't just another blockchain project. It was a monetary revolution. At the heart of that vision was an ambitious idea, a decentralized stablecoin, one that would maintain its value without any backing from fiat currencies or banks. No vaults full of dollars, no ties to governments, just pure code. They called it Terra USD or UST. Its value would be kept stable through a balancing act with a second token, Luna. The two coins were interlinked. When demand for UST went up, Luna would be burned, reducing its supply and increasing its price. When UST dropped below $1, more Luna would be minted and sold to bring the peg back. The model was designed to create incentives. If UST dipped to 97 cents, traders could buy it cheaply and redeem it for $1 worth of Luna, locking in profit and restoring the peg. If UST rose above $1, the reverse mechanism kicked in. It was a closed-loop system, elegant, mathematical, self-regulating. On paper, it looked genius. No central banks, no middlemen, just algorithmic equilibrium. And Do Kwon? He wasn't shy about it. He began appearing on interviews, podcasts, stages, boldly declaring Terra to be the future of money. He described the system as invincible. He dismissed critics as fools, and his followers loved him for it. They called themselves lunatics, a play on words that became eerily prophetic. By 2021, Luna's price was surging. UST was gaining traction. Billions were pouring into the ecosystem. Terraform Labs had backing from some of the biggest names in crypto: Galaxy Digital, Coinbase Ventures, Pantera Capital. To outsiders, it looked like a revolution in the making. To insiders, it looked like a rocket preparing for launch. But underneath the surface, the system's stability depended on one thing: constant belief. If that belief ever cracked, the elegant machine wouldn't slow down. It would implode. And though Do Kwon dismissed the skeptics, he couldn't ignore the truth. Every algorithmic stablecoin before Terra had eventually collapsed. The question wasn't if the system would be tested, only when. And still, he kept building. By late 2021, Luna wasn't just climbing, it was exploding. The price had surged over 13,000% in less than a year, from under $1 to more than $100. It became one of the top 10 cryptocurrencies in the world by market cap. And for its followers, it wasn't just an investment anymore, it was a movement. They called themselves lunatics, proudly. They wore it like a badge. Twitter was filled with laser eyes, rocket emojis, and memes praising Do Kwon like a prophet. Some even got tattoos of Luna's logo, permanent reminders of their faith in a coin that promised freedom from inflation, banks, and traditional finance. And at the center of it all stood Do Kwon, confident, unapologetic, unshakable. In interviews, he ridiculed competitors. In tweets, he taunted doubters. It wasn't just arrogance, it was a performance, a carefully crafted image of invincibility that the Luna community fed on. And while the hype machine roared, Anchor Protocol quietly became the engine behind the illusion. Anchor was a decentralized savings platform built on the Terra blockchain. It allowed users to deposit UST and earn an astonishing 20% annual yield. To some, it sounded too good to be true. To most, it sounded like free money, the secret. Anchor wasn't earning that yield through loans or investments. It was being subsidized by reserves, money that had to be constantly refilled by Terraform Labs and outside investors to keep the illusion going. But the inflows didn't stop. Retail investors, DeFi whales, even institutions, everyone piled in. At its peak, over $14 billion worth of UST was locked in Anchor. Kwon called it the future of savings. To critics, it looked more like a ticking bomb, an unsustainable yield dependent on infinite growth. But in the bull market frenzy of 2021 and early 2022, warnings were drowned out. Skepticism was unfashionable, and Terra's backers were rich, too rich to fail, many believed. So the price of Luna kept rising, the peg held, and belief hardened into dogma. What almost no one saw, what almost no one wanted to see, was that the entire system was built on circular logic. UST's stability depended on Luna. Luna's value depended on UST. It was a delicate equilibrium, and if either one slipped, the other would fall with it. That wasn't theory. It was math. And in May of 2022, the math finally broke. It began with a whisper. On May 7th, 2022, someone, still unidentified, began pulling billions of dollars out of Anchor Protocol. Not thousands, not millions, billions. UST was dumped onto the market, liquidity pools were drained, and within hours the unthinkable happened. UST slipped off its peg, 99 cents, then 98 cents. At first no one panicked. Stablecoins had depegged before, briefly. It was usually just a blip, but this time it didn't bounce back. Terraform Labs rushed to intervene. The Luna Foundation began deploying its newly acquired Bitcoin reserves, over $2 billion worth, to buy UST and restore the peg. It wasn't enough. By May 9th, the price had fallen below 90 cents. Anchor withdrawals turned into a stampede. Confidence evaporated in real time. And then, the algorithm kicked in. As UST fell, the smart contracts began minting massive amounts of Luna to absorb the imbalance. That was the system's design, a last line of defense. But there was a problem. The lower UST fell, the more Luna had to be created. The more Luna flooded the market, the more its price collapsed. And the more it collapsed, the more Luna had to be printed to maintain the peg. It was a feedback loop, a vortex, a death spiral. By May 10th, Luna's supply exploded into the trillions. Its price went from $80 to $30 to $3 to less than 1 cent. Exchanges began suspending trading. Reddit threads turned into panic shelters. People were watching their life savings vanish in front of them, hour by hour. UST dropped below 50 cents, then 30 cents, then 10 cents. It was no longer a stable coin, it was a falling knife. The system wasn't just failing, it was doing exactly what it was programmed to do, only in reverse. Luna, The supposed stabilizing force had become worthless. UST, once hailed as the decentralized dollar, had collapsed into worthlessness. Just gone. And for countless investors, the real consequences were only starting to unfold. When the dust finally settled, the numbers were incomprehensible. UST had collapsed to 9 cents. Luna was worth less than 1,000th of a cent. More than $45 billion had been destroyed. On paper, in savings accounts, in futures contracts and trading desks around the world. But it wasn't just numbers, it was people. Reddit filled with desperation. Some investors had lost everything: mortgages, retirement funds, college savings. One man in Taiwan reportedly took his own life after watching his portfolio vanish. Terraform Labs was silent. Do Kwon, once hyperactive on social media, vanished. Then came the rumors that Kwon had cashed out before the collapse, that insiders knew what was coming, that this wasn't a failure, but an exit strategy. People wanted answers. Regulators wanted blood. And then, Kwon resurfaced. A few days after the collapse, he posted a statement. "I am heartbroken about the pain my invention has brought on all of you," he wrote. He claimed he hadn't sold any tokens, that he was working on a revival plan, that Terra could be rebuilt. But few believed him, because by now it was more than just investors who were watching. South Korean prosecutors launched a full-scale investigation. They discovered that Terraform Labs had been deregistered in Korea just days before the collapse. They suspected fraud, market manipulation, and securities violations. And as the scope widened, so did the accusations. The US Securities and Exchange Commission opened its own case. Interpol issued a red notice. Do Kwon, once the face of innovation, was now an international fugitive. He tweeted defiantly that he wasn't on the run, that he'd cooperate, just not from a jail cell. But no one could find him. Until March 2023, when authorities caught him in Montenegro, trying to board a private flight using a fake Costa Rican passport. He was arrested on the spot. And soon after, the United States unsealed multiple federal charges: wire fraud, securities fraud, commodities fraud, conspiracy. South Korea sought extradition. So did the US, from a tech icon to a wanted man, in less than 1 year. And while Do Kwon faced justice, the crypto industry he helped shake was entering its own reckoning. The fall of Luna didn't just wipe out fortunes. It shattered something far more fragile: trust. For years, crypto had sold itself as the future of finance: decentralized, incorruptible, unstoppable. But after Luna's implosion, that dream looked less like inevitability and more like illusion. Investors who once swore by decentralization now demanded regulation. Governments that had largely ignored the crypto boom suddenly saw justification for a crackdown. And projects built on promises of mathematical perfection faced questions they couldn't easily answer. Because if Terra, the most ambitious algorithmic stablecoin ever attempted, could collapse in just 3 days, what else in crypto was living on borrowed time? Exchanges scrambled to distance themselves. Venture capital firms quietly scrubbed their websites. And for thousands of ordinary people, the damage was already irreversible. Mortgages gone, savings evaporated, lives upended. The collapse was a reminder that behind every chart, every white paper, every disruptive technology, there are human beings who bear the cost when systems fail. Do Kwon still insists Terra was not a scam, that he believed in the system until the very end. To him, it was a bold experiment that simply broke under pressure. But to many of the victims, that explanation rings hollow, because whether by arrogance, negligence, or design, the result was the same: tens of billions of dollars, gone in the blink of an eye. The Luna crash became more than a cautionary tale. It became a symbol, a reminder that in the pursuit of innovation, belief can blind, confidence can corrupt, and a single flaw in the code can erase years of trust in days. And so, the legacy of Terra is not just about the billions lost, or the fugitive who built it. It's about the danger of mistaking ambition for certainty, the danger of following profits instead of proof, and the price of building dreams on foundations too fragile to last. Because in the end, the Luna collapse wasn't just a failure of a coin, it was a failure of belief.